Hello and welcome. My name is Will and I am the inventor of this little guy, MiBuoy. MiBuoy is actually a completely new concept that I've spent months designing, prototyping. I've probably made, I'd say, in excess of 100 prototypes to get to this little product. Now, you're probably watching this and thinking, what on earth is it? What does it do, etc., etc. And I'm hoping in some of these videos that I'm going to put out that you get a full understanding of what it's capable of doing, what it does, and how to use it. So let's dive straight in. First of all, MiBuoy is a product that I've designed that alleviates having to cast, which is not the reason I designed it. But the reason I designed it is actually often when you're fishing either long river banks or you might be fishing on the side of an estuary and there's a strong current running, you know that a lot of those game fish in those situations are running in that current, and you want to put a live bait out there, or you want to put a lure, a rapala, you name it, paddle tail, any of those type of products will work perfectly well on MiBuoy. The idea is that this little guy, a little bit like a lip on a plug or a lure, you know how the lip, if you want to deep dive it, there's an angled lip, and the more you pull, the more it dives. Instead of this diving down vertically, this guy will go out and track out from you out into the river or estuary or lake or wherever you are at approximately 45 degrees. So let's say you're standing on the bank, you put it in the water and you slowly start letting some line out. This guy here, as you start walking this direction, let's say we're walking straight that way, once it's hooked on, this will start planing out at a 45-degree angle, and it will happily sit up to 40 meters out in a current. And if that current's just a normal medium kind of tidal current, it'll hold. If you were to stop walking and you're happy with its position, you can literally peg your rod in the sand and this guy will sit happily all day, or as long as that current's running, in that position. So that could be 30 meters, 40 meters. A lot of the time I use it 10, 20 meters out. Obviously you don't always want to fish it that far out. But at 45 degrees, which is the angle it tends to like to sit at eventually, that guy will start fishing for you. When I say fishing, basically it'll fish your lures, it will fish your live baits, and it will fish your normal baits. So you can put a chunk of mackerel or whatever on a hook behind, and it's up to you how long a leader line you want to use. Basically, there are videos, instructional videos showing you how this is all set up, but from about, I don't know, 50 to 100 mil back from here, this is where your leader line will start, and that leader line eventually gets to your hook, lure or bait or whatever you're using. So you could be using a 2-pound leader line if you're fishing, say, for tiny little fish in a small stream or river situation, and you can send MiBuoy out there and he will basically trawl that leader behind it, 2 meters behind or whatever length you decide to use will be your bait. So if you're running in a current in a larger situation and you use one of the larger ones, you can use easily up to a 6-inch live bait, trawl that out into the current, let this guy sit into that current. You can put your rod in a rod holder, and instead of having to cast and recast, it's more about keeping this guy 100% of the time in the strike zone, as it were. So you're not casting, winding, having to wind quickly because you know the last bit's no good, and then casting again, doing that all day long. You can literally walk this out exactly where you think those fish are, and it will sit there until a fish comes along and triggers it. And when I say trigger it, it's actually, it looks like a simple setup, but it's taken months to come up with this concept. What happens is you put, when you put this on the line, there are some instructional videos on how to use it. Your line will pull up into this barrel, and on that line is a small bead, swivel, or even one of those space beans that pulls up into the barrel, and it will lock at the top of the barrel. So when you're pulling on it, on your rod, you can pull as hard as you want. That's not coming undone. You can really, I mean, as hard as you want. I'm not exaggerating. It will not come out because it pulls it up into the top of this barrel. But if you notice and you look at it carefully, those barrels are pointing straight down here at the back. There's a swivel. These are pointing, look at the angles there. That points straight into there, that points straight into there. And even from the side, they point directly into here. So when you look down, let's say you look down the swivel, you will literally look straight up into those barrels. What that does is that although I can pull as hard as I want, the second the fish pulls or tugs on that bait, that little space beam, split shot, swivel, or whatever you're using as your trigger, pulls straight out of the back of that barrel with absolutely no friction whatsoever if you don't use the triggers. So the triggers are there, I would say for the first outing or two they're useful. It helps to keep your swivel in if you're learning to get the hang of it. But once you've got the hang of it after a few hours of use, you can take those out. And as long as you keep light tension on that line, and you'll find that if it's sitting in the current, obviously there's always tension on your line, so that your rod tip is ever so slightly bobbing up and down with the current as this thing is moving, but there's always a light tension on the line keeping that swivel pulled into the barrel. But like I say, the second a fish pulls or bites that bait behind, it'll pull that swivel or bead or split shot straight out, straight through the swivel, and instantly releases this guy so that it slides down until it gets to the stopper ball, again in the instructional video, and this becomes completely, I'd say, inert or neutral, so it no longer has any impact on resistance or anything during the fight or anything. You literally will not notice this is on your line. But in the meantime, that fish is now hooked, because through your rod, the second that fish pulls, you'll see that your rod tip moves just like if you're ledger fishing or any other type of fishing. Unlike float fishing, because obviously float fishing, you tend to have that slack line, you're watching your float and suddenly it bobs under and then you strike. This doesn't bob under when a fish hits the bait. Like I've just explained, what it does, it untriggers out of the tube and that fish is directly linked to you and your rod. So it's an extremely exciting, very visual way of fishing. Very often I'll see what we call garrick here in South Africa. They're big game fish. They can get over 20 kilos, but you don't even have to know where this guy is in the water, because once it's set, it's out there, and often you'll just see a big explosion behind. My rod, if I have put it in a rod holder, will be set on the lightest drag possible, and that drag screams there. So the fish takes off and all your line just flying through that back swivel. This guy will stay on the surface. That fish could be 30 meters away and it looks like nothing's happening, but the line's flying off your reel. Click your bail arm over and set the hook. Depends how you fish. I often fish with either a very light drag, obviously then you have to crank your drag up, set the hook, or you have an open bail arm and you have your drag preset. So all you do is, if you've got the open bail arm method, obviously you need to stand there holding the rod, watching what's going on, and the second you get a take, you just let that line feather through your fingers and that fish normally takes off. Give it 6-7 seconds. Normally the fish takes off, slows down a bit, and when it goes on its next run, you normally know he's picked it up, had time to eat it, and then he's off. The second that happens, bail arm over and you should be on. This guy, in the meantime, is totally released, and you really won't feel this guy on your line, because he tends to lie on the water while the line flies through here. I've never had tangling issues, because hence we use the swivel. In the earlier prototypes, I did have a couple of times where I had line twist and this was caught up on the line. Never had it since, and I must have caught 30 odd fish since then, because he tends to hang automatically at that angle and stays out of the way, and your line is running through that. So you can see it literally hanging there, and your drag is zzz, and this is literally hanging. So it's quite an amazing thing to see. That is obviously catching those predatory fish on live bait, but the concept really is, and you'll see, I mean, we have all types of species, but if you don't want to fish the live bait, you can fish a bunch of worms. Let's say you're freshwater fishing in the UK, you love fishing for tench or carp or roach or anything, absolutely perfect in those conditions as well. What you will find is it's like anything. If you go to a shop, you buy yourself a fly rod and fly reel and you want to learn to fly fish, you're not going to, after day one, know exactly how to fly fish. You'll get the hang of it. I would say this takes about an hour. You can get it out. You can probably get it 20 meters out. Most people, my friends who I've taken out fishing like that, caught on their first day, no problem. And within an hour or two, they're 200-300 meters away from me fishing on their own. They know exactly how to use it, how to turn it, how to change the buoyancy. But it's a product that the longer you use it, the more you use it, you start to realize you can use it for fishing literally on the bottom. I've fished this guy where you don't even see it. You actually take the float out like that and you send it out and keep enough pressure on it, you'll see it stays on the surface, and then as you let it slow down, this thing will sink right down 3-4 meters. You've still got your leader behind, you've still got your live bait or your bait, and then you just either, if it's in a current, you can hold it static, but if you're just fishing a canal or the banks of a lake, you just do a slow walk. So it's almost like ledgering, but you're on the move. It's actually quite exciting. And in those cases, you'll just, as you're walking, you'll just suddenly feel a rip on the rod, and it obviously takes off just like it would if you were lure fishing or bait fishing or anything. But there are so many facets to this, and you'll see that's exactly why we've got that whole weighting system, because some people like to use surface lures, some people like to use deep diving lures, and every single one of them will cause a different amount of pull. If you're using a deep diver, as you put MiBuoy in the water, everything looks good, but once you start getting up to speed, that back starts to drop because that lure underwater's obviously now got more resistance and is starting to pull down. In that case, I tend to move my weights forward. I would replace the back weight with buoyancy, so it's actually front heavy. But once it gets going, it actually starts to pull the back in and it neutralizes itself. But these are things that you'll learn as you go along. There's no way of me telling you what's the right situation for the right lure, because every lure is different. Every lure might have a different weight. Some are buoyant but are deep divers. Some are sinking lures but they're quite light. But after a while, once you start using your favorite lures, you'll know exactly how and what set you should have for the particular lures you're using. It's very interesting for me because, like I say, I know how well it works, and I'm no salesman, I'm just a very passionate angler. But I've fished this many times with my sons, and they were reluctant to use it at first when the first prototype, like sons are, teenagers, and they would be throwing their lures and I would be using one of these, and I would literally outfish them 3-1 every time, because while they were casting and having to wind back in, the current swinging in, I just put this guy out there, my live bait on the back or lure on the back. But remember, you're now fishing, once it's out there, 100% of the time in that strike zone. So it makes a huge difference on the amount of fish you catch. And it's something that kind of worried me a bit because, like I said, I'm not a salesman, but after fishing it and realizing, in fact, you don't even need a rod. I mean, I fished a hand line will get this out 40 meters. I enjoy fishing this very much on your normal center pin reels, or literally a fly reel. Just put your normal braid on a fly reel, walk this guy out, and obviously the fact that you're no longer having to cast, you can use any length rod, you can use any reel you like. Center pin, absolutely brilliant for the center pin because you can palm it out. The only thing is, I've learned at the center pin, it's amazing how powerful those 4 or 5 kilo Garrick are. And the problem sometimes is because the small center pins like this easily get it out 40 meters anyway, you'll hook a large garrick on a tiny center pin. It's actually quite scary. So I don't recommend that. Maybe go slightly bigger. But you kind of get the gist. It's a product that needs time. I would love it for people when they use it to give me some feedback as we go along, because I've got nothing to compare it to. The initial concept, I don't know if I've said, came from those large planer boards in America that they use. It's only used for boat fishing, and it's basically line spreaders. So you put one which sends it left, one that sends it right. And I was watching those videos and thinking, why has no one made like really small versions, very small? I mean, this is a medium. I've got a much smaller one than this. But why has no one ever come up with a lighter one? And to be fair, I kind of learned why not, because it's 10 times harder, the concept, than it sounds. And to make a trigger system that you could make that was so simple as this, it's extremely robust. These are solid, well, they're carbon tubes, 316 stainless steel. Everything has been designed to be bulletproof basically on this product. Yeah. So downsize from one of these large planer boards, and you'll see if you go on the YouTube videos, if you wanted to look it up, they all have big clothes peg type arms with clamps, and those clamps you have to adjust by turning, and then you clip your line in. So what you're actually doing is that when that fish hits the lure or bait, whatever you're trawling, but they tend to trawl 50, 60 meters behind one of these. It's just something to set the line out wider. The fish feels huge resistance on the planer board. The planer board is actually what sets the hook. So what sets this totally apart is not only just the size, that it's tiny. I use these on my ultralight rods, is the fact that it's got absolutely zero, if you don't use the triggers, the fish doesn't feel anything when it takes the bite. Apart from obviously your rod tip, as it would in any situation, and your drag, which is, I tend to set to the lightest setting possible. So going forward, it's going to be very interesting to see how people use this in certain situations. I mean, you can use it very well for cob fishing. If the cob are down deep, you either let this thing go down and you fish this underwater, like I said, remove the float, or you fish on the surface and put a very long leader on. You can put a 4-meter leader on. If you want to fish along the bottom, you take these two buoyancy, you see these weights, and you replace them. You replace the weights with the buoyancies that are included when you buy one of these in the box, which gives it a lot more buoyancy. And you can add your additional weight that you've taken out of here to the very bottom. So if you want your live bait near the bottom, you put the same equivalent 6-gram lead ball or whatever you want down near where your live bait is, and it will drop your live bait down, and this guy will still float on the surface. So you can fish this freshwater, you can fish it, I've said this many times, but you can fish it for the smallest little fish, roach, little tiny minnows. I mean, obviously depending from which country you're watching this from, it's anything. It's mullet fishing, absolutely deadly for the mullets, because you can just put a small bread flake behind you and to cast. You can send it right out to the mullet shoals and they're not spooked. You can put little tiny nymph flies on, you can catch trout on it, you can catch, the mullet on the fly, or you can pull 6-inch live baits or much larger lures. Obviously we do different sizes, so depending on what target species you're targeting, you use the right size. So I mean, you might end up with 3 different sizes in your box, and you'll find that it's not something you're going to use on every trip. I'm not trying to sell it to you, buy one, fish like this always, not at all. It's very much another tool to your toolbox, as it were. It's another way of fishing, and in the right situations, which is a lot of the time for me here, I will pull this out and I'll use that, and I definitely 100% will outfish other guys fishing the normal methods that you'd normally use. So I don't know what more to say about it. You'll see that there's a QR code, so if you forget how to use it, not right now, but as we get going, there's going to be more and more videos. There is the instructional video on there, but it takes you straight to the website. There's going to be reviews on there, lots of videos, more products, more accessories, hard cases for this. But this is very early days for me still. So like I say, 4 months ago, this was just a concept still. So we've now brought it to market and we are full steam ahead. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it gives you a little bit more insight, and like I say, buy one, don't buy one, it's totally up to you. But coming from a true fisherman, and I've done every type of fishing, my fly fishing background really is where I started. I tend to be a lighter fisher. I'm not saying ultra light, but I you know, heaviest rods I'll fish is a 4-ounce rod, and that's for my heavier beach type fishing. So that most of my fishing's done on sub 20-pound braid, if you see where I'm coming from. So it's definitely a product that I highly recommend for the inland waters, estuaries, and excellent for sea fishing, as long as you don't have breaking waves. They do not like breaking waves. If you can get it past the breaking waves, it will work, but believe me, it won't work. I've tried it. You might be lucky. If you find a gap and there's a nice rip, get it out behind the waves, then you'll be fine. But yeah, not recommended for breaking waves. But give it a go, see what you think, and let us know. It's MiBuoy.com, and look us up, and be interested to know how you get on. Lovely. Thank you very much for your time.